And today I will have welcome our favorite guest, Don Hanson, who is very well known in the dog community and in dog training community. Welcome, Don, in our show today. So, Don, I'm so excited having you here, and I was following most of your posts, and I was reading also your blogs, kind of like a secret watcher from you know how it goes. Um, and one thing that really impressed me is your background and the story how you got into dog training behavior and even into remedies. And you're not a born trainer, so you're coming from a long story of with your family being involved with animals, but not really as a dog trainer. How did you end up in with dogs and training and behavior and remedies? What happened there?
Well, I mean, I wanted a dog, I think, from the time I was probably 4 years old. We had moved into a new home, and the one immediate neighbor had a Cocker Spaniel, and one had a Sheltie. That dog was named Cindy. I don't remember the Cocker's name, and I really wanted a dog. I had other family members with dogs, and we were on vacation. We had. My parents had friends who lived in northern Wisconsin, which is where I'm from originally, and they had a resort. And so we would go and visit them every summer. And Dee also was a groomer and bred and showed poodles. And so I would get to play with the poodles every summer when we stayed there. And I had one I became really attached to. Her name was Desiree, and Dee gave me a photo, or her husband, George, was a professional photographer, and they gave me a picture of Desiree to take home. And, so that was kind of where I had my doggy fix. And then one year we were leaving there. I was probably 5 years old, and we stopped at they used to call them waysides, little stops along the highway where you could get out and go to the bathroom and stuff. And there was somebody there with a dog they had found, and they decided they couldn't take it home. And somehow, I think her name was, they had called her Buffy. She ended up coming home with us. And we had her my mom and dad both worked. I was an only child. And after having her for about 2 days, my parents realized, okay, we know he wants a dog, but this just isn't going to work. It's not fair to the dog. They did the right thing, found the dog a home, and I still wanted a dog, and they finally broke down my junior year of high school. Which I look back at, and I think, boy, what a poor decision on their part, because Dad retired 3 months after that with the idea that they were going to travel. And, I was a junior in high school. They should have known my interest would expand beyond dogs. And her name was Trivia. She was a delight, but, they raised her for the next 6 years, basically. But then when my wife and I got married and had a place of our own, she came back to live with us. So that's kind of how I got into dogs. And this was back, so I would have gotten Trivy in 1975. So this is back when a time when I shouldn't say nobody, but most people didn't train their dogs, especially if it's a pet dog. So really didn't know a lot. I mean, it's amazing she turned out to be the delight she was in spite of no effort on my part. And so that was my first dog. When she passed, my wife and I were kind of going through some transitions. We were driving back and forth to work an hour each day, each of us in separate cars. And so she went back into my parents' care again for a while. And then when we finally were able to sell our home and we moved to where we were both working, we were there for about a month, and we decided, okay, we should get another dog. And Paula was working for a vet at the time, so we asked him for a lot of advice. And he recommended a Cairn Terrier with what I know now. That definitely wouldn't be my first recommendation for a couple getting their first dog. But that's what we decided we wanted. We started looking all over the place, and then because we were being impatient, we found a dog at a pet store. So that's the one we picked and brought home. And Gus is probably the biggest, or that's what we named him, Gus, is probably the biggest reason we got into this profession, because within a year's time, he had all sorts of medical issues. We were told to take him to training classes by Paul, his boss, and so we did that. We were also told to read a couple of books. The one by the monks of Newskeet, How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend, I think is what they called it.
Yeah.
And the one by Carol Lee Benjamin, both which had a very aversive dominance-based approach. And not knowing any better, we read those and we followed the script. And I still remember, probably one of the starting point to a lot of this was the first night we took Gus to puppy class. Now, when we got him from the pet store, he was already 12 weeks of age. So, if I were getting a puppy today, I'd want them much younger than that. But we took him to puppy class, knowing he didn't know squat. And within the first 5 minutes, there were two people teaching the class, and it was done by a dog club. And they said, command your dog to sit. And I thought, okay, I will, but this seems kind of fruitless because, that's why I'm here, to learn how to teach him that. And so I asked Gus to sit, and he kind of looked at me like, yeah, what, okay, I don't get it. Wasn't a surprise to me. And then one of the instructors basically said, your dog's being dominant. You have to teach him who the boss is. And then told me I had to give him an alpha roll, and kind of looked at me with a lot of disdain. And you do know what that is, don't you? And I had, because I read the book. And so I kind of approached Gus slowly, and she says, no, you've just got to go in there and grab that scruff, pick him up, throw him on his back. Then I want you to get down in his face and growl. And I'm thinking, okay, this sounds really kind of stupid, kind of dangerous. Not sure I want to do this, but these were the experts. We paid good money for this class. I knew squat about dogs. So I did it, and Gus immediately started thrashing about, growling. He was obviously terrified for his life. I know that now, didn't at the time. And then she told me, grab that muzzle, put your hand around it, hold it as tight as you can, and don't let go until he stops. And so a little alarm bell went off again, but I was ignoring it because I figured these people aren't going to tell me anything bad to do. And I did, and Gus bit into the palm of my hand. I immediately let go. He was up, got a dirty lick from both instructors. One went to get some ice for my hand, and handed my wife the leash, went and sat down. And Paula took Gus to the rest of the classes. I mean, Gus and I had a great bond the short period of time we had him. We were playing, we were having a lot of fun, and he didn't trust me, rightfully so. I didn't trust him. Took us a long time to get that back. And, so that was a foundation lesson for training and behavior. Gus also, within a year's time, developed a number of medical issues. He had some behavioral issues, which I kind of look back on that, maybe that little incident alone contributed to that. We eventually found a Dr. Trish McConnell, which may be a name that people recognize. She's a university professor at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She actually ran a dog training school at the time, and we enrolled in her classes. And we had a second dog by this time as well. And those were all positive reinforcement based. She also did behavior consultations. We went to see her took Gus to see her for that because he had some borderline separation issues, and he would also try to bite people when they left the house. our nickname for him was the doorman at the Hotel California, because you can come, but you can never leave. He was always happy to see people. But so we started working with her, and that built up my interest in dog training. I saw another way. And about all the time this was happening, we decided we wanted to do something different with our lives. My wife was a vet tech, as I said, and I had spent 17 years in the medical device industry in a variety of management roles. And, I was getting tired of working 6 days a week and really long days. And we had been selected to serve on the board of the Madison Audubon Society probably about 3 years before we started going through this process. And the role we were assigned was to manage their nature store. And, so we selected bird-related books, sweatshirts, CDs, weren't DVDs yet at the time, bird feeding supplies and things like that, and to manage the inventory, to sell it. And we liked working together. We decided we liked doing retail, and we thought, maybe we should do something like this. This would be something to do. And then we started to look at other opportunities. And one of the things that Paula was aware of is that we had a dire need for more boarding kennel capacity in our hometown back in Wisconsin, because they would always get calls at the kennel, or not at the kennel, at the vet's office, where can we board Sparky? Every place is filled. And so we talked to the folks that ran the kennel and owned the kennel where we took our dogs when we needed someplace to take them. And they said, oh yeah, we definitely could use another facility in the area. They hooked us up with the American Boarding Kennel Association. We flew out to Colorado for a 2-day seminar called, it was something like buying, building, and operating a pet care facility. And there were probably, I'm going to guess, about 12 people, probably representing about 8 couples that were there. And it was interesting at the end. I would say all but about 2 of us were thinking, yeah, this isn't for us. And we thought, no, this is something we'd like to do. And so we started looking for property where we could build a kennel in our community. And it became evident really quickly that zoning was going to be an issue. We finally found land we liked. We put in an offer to buy it contingent on getting zoning after going through lots of money and lots of hearings. They said, yeah, no, we'd love to have you build a home out here, but we don't want any noisy dogs from the city. And so at that point, we started looking for a facility we could buy. And there was a facility we ruled out some states right away. We really weren't interested in moving into the Sun Belt. And there was a facility in Vermont that piqued our interest, one in Tennessee, one in Michigan, and one in Maine. And what was really weird is we had vacationed in Maine the summer before, and we really, really liked it. And we thought, after we do this doggy thing, this would be a great place to retire to. Well, it turned out that was the facility that had the best profit and loss that, we liked, looked like it had the most potential to provide two incomes for us. And we visited in July, made an offer in August. Our offer was accepted in about the middle of September, and we had 3 weeks to move and make it all happen. That's how we got here.
So that became then Green Acres.
Well, it was Green Acres ahead of time. We're the third owner, and it would not have been the name we would have chosen, but we thought, okay, we're buying an existing business with clientele that's been around for quite some time. So we became the new owners of Green Acres Kennel Shop. And where we are still today, we do boarding and daycare for both dogs and cats. We board the occasional other small critter, everything from rabbits to ferrets. really kind of restricted to mammals. We do grooming, we do dog training classes, pet behavior consulting, and we've got a retail store where we sell dog and cat food and supplies. We really focus just on canines and felines for that. And we've been doing that since October of 1995.
This is awesome, really. Um, I've been very close to that direction, like finding a facility in Connecticut back then and do kind of like a different approach in the classical dog training, being more holistic perspective. And I had faced the same issues, zoning, location. It was too far away from people to come in and drop off their dogs on the way to work. So you should become a shuttle to pick up the dogs from Greenwich, kind of bring them back for an hour, driving back. And I was like, that's not working.
And that was the real risk we would if we would have been successful in getting zoning on the land we wanted in Wisconsin. It was probably a good 40 minutes out of the city. We might not have been successful. So I mean, this may have been the best thing that could happen. We're on a major thoroughfare coming into Bangor, and so it's worked really well. And we are actually within the city limits. We're in an area that's zoned for agriculture, so it's not like we've got a lot of housing around us, and we've got a big buffer of woods behind us and things like that. So it's been a really good location for us.
We had some connection issues. So you're saying about being on the highway.
Yeah, we're on a main, one of the main roads into Bangor. There's a lot of people that live in some of the outlying communities and commute in. So people drive past us every day, which has been good for the daycare business. We're literally, I could walk to the airport if I wanted to. We have people from Canada sometimes that will board with us. They fly out of Bangor if they're going to Florida because it's so much less expensive, and then come back, pick up their dogs. So we're close that way. It's really been a very, very nice location for us.
I noticed that you have interesting certifications. So you are a cat behaviorist, you are a dog behaviors consultant, and you are a certified dog trainer, and your Bach Foundation registers animal practitioners. Now, sticking to that Bach remedies practitioner, I think you were the first one who brought it to US.
I was the first one in the Americas, actually. There were a lot of people in the UK. There was one person in Australia, and I think there were a couple of others somewhere in Northern Europe at the time. But with Gus having all of his behavioral stuff, his health issues, that kind of got us into complementary medicine. And he developed seizures after we got out here. Mm-hmm. And we were looking for ways, when he came out of a seizure, he was really disoriented. And I don't know how I had learned about Rescue Remedy, but we had started using it with him when he came out of a seizure, not expecting it to help the epilepsy, but to help the recovery. And it seemed to be helpful. And so I started reading more about it. And I had clients who came in one day with a dog with mild separation anxiety, and really nice people, but they both worked. And I knew enough about separation anxiety to know, man, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but and they were health practitioners as well, more of a holistic bent. And I said, I've heard about this stuff called Rescue Remedy. I use it this way with my dog. If you go to the health food store, I know they sell it because that's where I get it. You might try that. And I said, I'm not promising anything because I really didn't know. And within a week, I got a call back, and they were just, oh, Don, we are just so thankful think the dog's name was Turtle, if I'm remembering right. And it's like, Turtle, this is taking care of it. And I thought, wow, there's something to this stuff. I have to start studying it. And so right away, I went to the Bach Foundation site in England, and found that they even had an animal practitioner program. And at the time, you had to complete the first 2/3 of the human practitioner program, which I could do in the US, but the only place the animal practitioner program was offered was in England. And so I think it was around March of that year, I did the first human program in Boston, and then in June, I did the second one with the goal, because they only offered these every so often in England, and I managed to get into the September program in for level 1 in England. So was over there, did that, came back. I think, if I remember right, I did the level 2 in around December, and then they were discussing about when they were going to do the level 3 program, and I was hoping maybe for the next summer, because everybody, I came in with more knowledge of dogs than most of the other people there, but everybody there came in with years of background on the Bach flower remedies, and so I really felt a little bit out of my
intimidated.
element. Yeah, you know, but man, don't do this so soon. They ended up doing it in February, so I went back for level 3. And then after that, we had to do a series of case studies that we submitted online. And well, actually, no, we had to do that in between. We had to do those, because then we had like an oral exam in February. And yeah, okay, I got the sequence wrong. Had the oral exam, then we were given written case studies we had to do, and I completed the program and was credentialed at the end of that year. And I've been using them ever since with most of my behavior clients. They have a choice. Don't have to use it if they don't want. The Bach Foundation requires, and this is based on an agreement that they made with the Royal Academy of Veterinary Surgeons in the UK, that in order for people to practice, that practitioners would get a veterinary referral and keep the vet involved in the process. It's one that I agree with, one I have done. I think I've had 2 clients since I've been practicing, I think it was since 2003, that the vet said, yeah, no, I'm not going to get involved with that hocus pocus stuff, and I'm not going to give a referral. And the client said, well, do you know a vet that will? And I said, well, I've worked with this vet, and they got another referral, and I was able to help them and their clients. And sometimes, you know, but the big thing with the flower remedies is picking the right remedy. And so you've really got to understand animal behavior to the species level to make that selection. One of the things they taught us, my first class over in England, there is a remedy that is used for dominant type behavior. And they said, this is the biggest selling remedy to people with dogs worldwide. And they said it's the one most often misapplied, because they were already on the, you know, this dominant stuff. We just got to let it go. It's not helpful. And so I thought that was really, really interesting. And it is a reason why some people that that don't have the background in behavior and would go to some of the books or something they might find, might try the remedies and do it yourself type treatment. Pick Vine because someone's told them their dog is dominant, they don't see results, and then they say, oh, these things don't work. So there's a real art to picking the remedies, and that comes with experience. The fewer you use, generally, the better result you get. Most of the dogs that I see come to me for some type of anxiety or fear disorder. either fear, aggression, separation anxiety. And so the remedies have been very useful there. But I also recommend pheromones. I send them to their veterinarian for medications if I think that is worth looking at, because my main goal is I want to keep the animal from suffering. And, you know, animals with severe separation anxiety, I don't think people truly appreciate how much they are suffering. And it's really a sad thing to see. And so sometimes meds help. Somewhere along the way of all of this, we discovered homeopathy, both for ourselves and our animals as well. And so I've got a homeopathic vet I routinely refer to. We had some behavioral issues with our golden retriever that's really saved her life. And then we now have a Chinese medicine vet in the area who is credentialed not only in acupuncture, but in the whole Chinese herb philosophy, the Chinese approach to nutrition. And he does a limited amount of behavior work, but I've sent some folks there as well for some additional things they can get. So that's kind of how I got involved in the whole complementary medicine thing, which I don't think I had said that. I know when you and I had talked privately, we had talked about this, but I spent 17 years in the medical device industry. Classically trained from a science engineering background. So when my wife first told me we were going to explore homeopathy for Gus, our dog with epilepsy again, I was like, oh my God, no. What kind of stuff have you been reading? Yeah. And she signed us up for a 4-day seminar with a veterinary homeopath. And I went just 100% skeptical. And I have to say, before our morning break, he had me thoroughly convinced, because he started talking about physics, he started talking about chaos theory, and he presented it from a scientific perspective that made me really, really think, okay, there's no reason this can't work just because we don't understand how it doesn't work. You know, he talked about, you know, there's a whole lot of drugs. We don't really know how they work, but we accept them. Talked about the history and the success homeopathy had. And the more I started to learn, the more I thought this is something worth learning about. And then we saw it starting to work with acute things for ourselves and our dogs. And then Ticken came along, who was our golden, who had a severe aggressive response and what we would call OCD behavior in a human, which was traced back to her rabies vaccine. And we went the traditional route.
Okay. We're getting where.
Yeah, we went the traditional route, and we got a referral down to you know, the closest place with a veterinary behaviorist. Well, we started with our local vet first, and so they put her on an anti-anxiety med, and then the veterinary behaviorist just increased the dose and asked me if I had ever heard of clicker training, and I explained, yeah, I have. I've been doing this for a few years now, and I kind of was skeptical I was just going to train her out of this, because the aggression was serious, but what was really disturbing was the OCD behavior. If she saw the smallest shadow or light, like if I were sitting in the room and the light caught my watch and I happened to move my hand, she would just look up and fixate on it. It got to the point I wouldn't take her out unless it was totally overcast, or obviously I took her out to do the bathroom and stuff, but we couldn't go out and play. We couldn't go for walks because she would just become totally enraptured with that little sliver of light. And, you know, so the vet behaviorists at clicker training increased the dose of the anti-anxiety med. So what I had was a sleepy, staggering OCD. You know, she moved very, very slowly, but she still wanted the light. And, you know, that went on. We just feel this is no life for her to live. And called Trish McConnell back in Wisconsin, because we had done some work with her, with Gus. And she doesn't normally do phone consults, or she wasn't at the time anyway. She agreed to do that. So I sent her all of the information I had. And she basically said, I've seen dogs like this before. I've had no success with just behavior modification. Haven't seen any success with drugs. But have you thought about homeopathy? And it's just like, wow, we used homeopathy with Gus. Don't know why we hadn't got there, but we said, no, we're going to explore that. And by this time, we had found a homeopath actually here in Maine. When the one we were working with Gus was down in the Carolinas, so it was a lot of phone consults. And made an appointment and did a thorough exam and came up with some possibilities, asked a lot of questions about when Tick had last been vaccinated and when we saw things started, and said, I think this is a rabies miasm. And a miasm in homeopathy is when the animal is exhibiting signs of a disease that are very similar to the disease that really aren't the disease. And she said, so that's how I'm going to treat it. And she picked her remedy. We gave her the first remedy there, and then she gave us instructions again and to do it in 10 days and said, then call me back. And we were seeing improvements by 10 days. And we eventually weaned her off the anti-anxiety med. And then we were already managing her, keeping her. We had 4 other dogs and a cat at the time, so we were controlling her interactions with other animals. And we kept managing to do that. And I probably did that a little longer than we needed to. If you ask my wife or a good friend of mine who's our operations manager here at the kennel, they would probably tell you, Don, you could have quit that 6 months earlier. But our Pekingese lost an eye over the first aggression incident, and I just didn't want that to happen again. And so we eventually, we had a cure, and she lived to be 16. So that was probably the last 10 years of her life. She was symptom-free. We always got nervous whenever we had to do a rabies exam or rabies vaccine. So we treated her prophylactically when we did that. And she eventually developed thyroid disease, which by the time we took her to the homeopathic vet, one of the first things they did was a complete thyroid panel. And she had some numbers that were off the charts that they had never seen before. And Judy said, well, this is, the thyroid disease has been attacked as part of the immune process, and eventually we're going to have her on thyroid meds, so that was a contributing factor there. And she then, I don't know how many years later, developed golden retriever uveitis, which is an eye disease that's specifically been named after golden retrievers. Our regular vet he's really fascinated with eyes, and so we took her in to see him, and he really did a lot of research, and he discovered this obscure disease that there had just been a couple things written about, and we were early enough. We started treating it right away. She never lost an eye. A lot of dogs will end up having to have an eye removed because of it, but that's also believed to be caused mediated problems. And so she eventually ended up on thyroid meds, but the last 10 years of her life, no OCD, no aggression. She was just the wonderful dog back.
It's interesting that I see where you started buying books, using aversive methods, understanding that they're not functioning right. All of a sudden you end up doing remedies, homeopathic, and with one dog, right? So
it started with Gus. It moved on to Ticken. Some of our other dogs we've used homeopathically with acutely. We had a cat who we treated homeopathically for. This was a 12-year-old cat my wife adopted. She didn't have any disease that we knew of at the time, but we had her 6 months and she was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a type of cancer in the ear, and our regular vet said, she might not survive the surgery, and if I do the surgery, it's going to hurt, it's going to come back. a regular vet works very cooperatively with our complementary practitioners. And he says, why don't you see if Dr. Herman can help you? And we contacted her, and we gave, her name was Hanger. That's the name she came with. There's a story there if you want to know it. But we treated her with homeopathy, and she lived to be, I don't know, it's probably about another 9 months. Really wasn't suffering from it, and we were able to give her a good life. So we use it frequently. I use no-sodes for canine cough. We take those at the kennel. That was one of the other things when we discovered that Ticken had this vaccine reaction. I got very involved in researching vaccines, and this was before the AAHA came out with their revised guidelines where, it was every year the dogs get the vaccines. Here in Maine, even though the rabies vaccine was approved for 3 years, they required it every 2 because they thought you needed to have that year of slop in there just in case. And so really started researching that whole issue a lot, became very, very involved with that. Got some blowback from some of the vets in the community, but, same thing with, I haven't been afraid of blowback. Get the same thing nutrition-wise, and now most of them are saying, "Gee, yeah, you were right on some of this stuff." It really has come to fruition, and so got very involved with the Rabies Challenge Fund. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
Yep.
That was actually started by a woman here in Maine who had a similar story, only she had a lab instead of a golden. And she was one of the very first guests we had on our radio show, too. And we talked about that. A few years back, we had Ron Schultz, who's at the University of Wisconsin, probably the dean of the veterinary immunology community, and who's been wrote a textbook in the 1970s that said this annual vaccine stuff was nonsense. And that was one of the first places where I latched onto someone as an expert. But we did actually 4 shows with him, which have been our most popular shows we've ever done. People still listen to them. They have been heard all around the world and talked about vaccines. And so, yeah, it's been with a number of dogs. And I really think it's my science and engineering background that a lot of people, that would prevent them from getting to where I did. But when I saw things that weren't working, why, who was it Ben Franklin said, to keep doing the same thing is a sign of insanity? And it's like, people have called me crazy, but not for that. I mean, this isn't working. We've got to find something else. And there's so much empirical and anecdotal evidence that some of these things work. I mean, Chinese medicine has been going on for 5,000 plus years. They wouldn't still be using it if it didn't work.
Right. I see also that you are in the section of the Shock-Free Coalition in Maine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, my first exposure to shock collars was at the first dog training conference I went to in 1998. And there were a group of us that heard that one of the shock collar companies was going to be there, and we were really very, very much opposed to that. So we all got together there and met in somebody's hotel room, and we're planning on ways we could protest. And there was a online chat group at the time for this organization, and so there was a lot of stuff there, and the people who thought shock, and for that matter, they thought all aversives were good, and they nicknamed us. They thought that it was a term of derision, the treat slinging weenies. So someone in our group had connections with a graphic designer and could make T-shirts. So we actually had these shirts designed with a hot dog with legs tossing treats, and that we were wearing, kind of as a form of protest. And but by that time, I really, as I learned more, really became convinced that shock was just, I vowed it would be something I would never use, and I never have. And out of that, was a few years later, would have been around 2001, I think. There were some people that convinced me to run for the board of directors for this organization. And part of it because they knew my position on shock, and the organization was, wasn't pro shock, but wasn't really saying don't ever do it either. They didn't want to seem to be unwelcoming. And I was elected, and I started my term in January, and at our second in-person meeting in July, I had a resolution there to, I call it a dog-friendly philosophy, but which would eventually said, we would not recommend nor would we use anything that could cause animals, intentionally designed to cause animals emotional or physical pain. And was all excited and went through all the appropriate channels and introduced it, and it failed to get discussed because I couldn't get anybody else on the board to even second it.
We're talking about the Association of Professional Dog Trainers here, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay.
And I remained on that board for that time I was elected to a second term for 6 years, kept looking for other opportunities to introduce it, became the vice chair and was even the chair my last year. Started approaching it from a different venue. We started to work on some educational stuff, so I got very involved in the educational side, and I had been very involved in the certification side prior to being elected to the board. I was on the committee that developed the CPDT exam, and I thought, well, that at least is a move in the right direction. Recognize maybe we'd have to do this in phases, and was running their education committee for a couple of years after leaving the board, and then was asked to come back to the board, did another 3-year term, spent another year and a half as chair, and then treasurer, and then I termed out and I decided not to run again. And it was a couple of years after that they made some decisions which I just really had issues with, and resigned my membership. Started looking for another organization, found the Pet Professional Guild, and was like, oh my God, why didn't I find these people before? Because they're doing exactly what I've been wanting for so long. And became a member, went to a conference, and shortly after that was recruited to be a member of the advocacy committee, and eventually was recruited to be the co-chair of the advocacy committee.
Which is the Shock-Free Coalition initiative.
That
right?
is, well, yeah, the advocacy committee has other responsibilities, but for right now, the Shock-Free Coalition is our major focus. And we created this separate entity, the Shock-Free Coalition. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm the co-chair of that. I am the coordinator of the coordinators. We're trying to get coordinators all over the world, and I'm the main regional coordinator for that. And basically what that involves is trying to recruit people to take the pledge, both pet care professionals, pet owners, and to get them involved in advocating and educating. And we're looking at this as a long-term project. It's not going to happen as quickly here in the US as it did in England,
UK, Germany,
yeah. It's happened very, very quickly there. It's going to be a state-by-state issue here, and it's just going to take us some time. But so we're really focusing on building that infrastructure, and that's been my passion. This is what I wanted to happen at APDT, and I naively, I think, when I was first elected, thought, okay, this is an issue we can resolve in 2 or 3 years, and they're going to be gone. I'm in it for the long game now. I recognize that's where we have to be. So if we can get this accomplished in my professional lifetime, I will be very happy. And that's where I'm really trying to focus.
I think I want to take some time and talk specifically, maybe in another video blog, about the shock collars and the idea of the shock collars. And I want to look into both sides, because if you want to clear a belief system, you have to understand what people really believe in order to understand how to help them with their own perception, with their own side, to recognize that that belief eventually is questionable.
Yep. No, I think that's good, and that's one of the things we're doing. We're collecting a lot of data too, as to determine who's using them, why they're using them. There's lots of science out there, and I'd be happy to do that at another time. I've got an article that will be published in the July issue of Barks from the Guild, the PPG journal, that addresses a lot of the science that supports our position that it shouldn't be used, and also talks about things that people can do to help. Like I wear one of these little buttons every single day, and I keep extras in my pocket. And my wife had surgery earlier in the month, and we were in the room. She's getting ready for pre-op, and the nurse says, "I like your button. Is that what I think it's for?" And I said, "Well, if it's against using shock collars on dogs, yeah." She says, "Yeah, I'm all for that." And I said, "Do you want it? If you wear it, I'll give it to you." Handed it out, asked her to go to the website at shockfree.org and sign the pledge. She said, "I will be glad to do that." I've given them out to people I've run into at coffee shops. Yesterday, my staff and I, it was Bangor Pride Day, and we had a table at the Pride Festival and Parade, and one of the things we were talking about was shock, and we gave people information on how to sign the pledge, and I gave away a whole slew of buttons yesterday. And so we just want to build this database to show that people really get this is a bad idea. So I always have these with me.
Now, I see how you modified and how you went through different stages and recognize from inside out how things work. You started with the training. You have seen how aversive training works. It didn't work for you. It didn't work for your dog. You moved on. You found other trainers and you found other behaviorists. I feel like you're open-minded to say, if I cannot help it, maybe somebody else can help me, without being like stubborn and egoistic. Because it's not, if it doesn't work for me, I'm done with it, right? And then I see also you have this tendency into like being open-minded into even alternative approaches, and even Chinese medicine, and understanding about the nutritional aspect of behavior, and also understand that nutrition affects behavior, which is another aspect of behavioral modification.
It's huge,
right? Okay,
yeah,
and I'm not starting even about the raw diet that you actually also encourage. So I see we have many things in common, and I also appreciate, and that's why I thought we had this open chat, and with not any directions and not any plans, because I just wanted to see who is the person who has that idea and that passion behind nutrition, behind pain, force, and no fear policy, and how I will be able to help you reach that goal. Because I'm coming from the same angle. I was, and I'm not proud, but I share it. I was, when I moved to US, so everybody's like using e-collars and shock collars and prong collars. I didn't like the prong collars. I'm coming from an engineering perspective. I knew Springer company from inside. I have seen them working, and I've seen patents from German ancient military guys who have patented in the prong collar in the first place. And so I've seen also, how electronics work. And I thought, well, I can use the e-collar. It sounds okay if applied correctly according to instructions. And from an engineering perspective, I try to understand how it works, and I have all these ideas, and I even called, manufacturers and try to speak with engineers there and try to understand why does a dog react differently in a low stimulus for the same amount of energy, and how a dog will react to a high stimulus with the same amount of energy, and how does it not work? And I ended up with like, what? It actually doesn't work the way a dog would like to be addressed, because I recognize not the idea, because the idea is okay to remotely affect the dog's behavior, but how to apply it was suddenly against my idea. And I have to admit that it took me a lot of out of the box thinking to trust not to use it because I was bought into it.
Well, their presentations, the way they present it, are very, very effective. And I would never say it doesn't work. But what I would say is often when it works, there are negative consequences.
Comes with the cost.
Huge, comes with a cost, and it's not necessary. You know, what part of my learning as a trainer is I had the opportunity to take some classes with Bob and Marion Bailey. And, you know, talk about people that know about animal training. You know, Bob was intimately involved with the beginning of the work done that the Navy did with sea mammals. And they do something far more rigorous than any pet dog or any working dog. And it's all been accomplished with positive reinforcement. You know, so you don't need to use this stuff. And when you don't need to use something and it's got side effects, to me, that puts it in the not good for welfare column, which is also the way of saying this is no longer humane, it's abusive.
How would you think the relationship between the handler or the owner or the dog parent, let's give it a name, and the dog affects the dog's behavior? Do you think that having a different relationship may eventually remove all the behavior issues or most of the behaviors a dog could show?
I think having a good relationship with a dog is fundamental. And by good relationship, I think it comes down to trust. You know, my dog's got to like me. I've got to like my dog. I was just working on some updates to our handouts the other day, and one of the things I just put in there, and you know, and I tell people this all the time, but I'm always trying to find new ways to say it. If you've had a lousy day at work and you're mad at the world, don't train the dog, because they're going to pick up on it. It's going to show so much, and it's just not going to be helpful. So, you know, I think having that relationship is very, very fundamental, and that's what I really strive. A lot of times even with my training clients, but especially with behavior clients, the first thing I'm going to look at is explore the relationship, and let's make this relationship the fantastic thing we want it to be. And if that relationship is not going to happen, if it's been so severely damaged, and it might be it's from the person's side is never going to be able to get to trust this dog again, then let's rehome the dog sooner rather than later and try to find some place where we can help this dog. You know, whether relationship would solve all behavior problems, it's a nice idea, but I think some of them also come from fundamental disruptions in the brain chemistry. I mean, my golden kitten was a perfect example. There was nothing in her relationship, the relationship she and I had, it was not suffering. I mean, I was heartbroken, but it was not suffering, but that was not going to fix what was going on there. So I think it depends on exactly where the behavior issues are coming from. I think it depends on how early we intervene. You know, I see a lot of bad behavior problems, which could be something like aggression, but it could just be, you know, house training issues. If it's allowed to go on for months or years, or I'll give you an example. I had someone with a dog who hated children. They knew it from the time they got it as a puppy. It didn't become an issue until the dog was 7 years of age, and now they had grandchildren in their life. And they wanted me to fix it in 2 weeks because that's when the grandchildren were coming to visit for the first time. And it's like, you know, that's not going to happen. And so we talked about management. I said, it's not going to cure the dog, but at least it's going to prevent something from happening. And after a long discussion, you know, they decided they could effectively manage this for the rest of the dog's life, and that probably made the most sense because, you know, I also told them, 7-year-old dog, we can work on this, but it's not going to come easy, and there's no guarantee we're going to get to the point where the dog is going to say, oh, all children are good or even tolerate children.
Right.
So how long it's going on, I think, is a factor. There's the more I get involved in behavior, the more I realize how complex it is. There's the nutritional side of things. It's just, and I think that's one of the reasons it's not taught a lot in vet school, because vet school's complicated enough. They have to learn all of these species, just physiology and anatomy alone. We're frying their brains. And now, horses, dogs, cats, behavior's hugely different too. And I'm getting way off topic here, but I think we'd almost be better off having vets decide after their first year which species they're going to specialize on, rather than having them learn everything, because I'd rather have somebody know everything they can about a species than be a jack of all trades on everything from cattle to giraffes to dogs.
You have so much to share, and you have a huge amount of passion that comes in with a healthy drive to educate. And I also make sure I mention it, that you also have a radio show.
Yes.
Okay, so the radio show is, I think if I remember right, this is the Woof Meow Show, right?
Yep.
Or Word Woof Meow Show, and you have it every Saturday.
Yep. The Woof Meow Show is the show. And after I had done that for a few years, I thought I should have a corresponding blog. So I have a blog that's called words-woofs-meows.com. And the podcasts are published on the blog, as well as a lot of other stuff on the blog. People can listen to it live because the radio, well, no, not live. The show is pre-recorded because it just makes it easier. But they can listen to it as it's broadcast because the radio station streams it. And we also release it as podcasts. And we talk about everything from behavior to nutrition, or the past couple of years we've started doing these shows where I'll see stuff come through that comes up in the news about something about
dog bites,
the news, dog bites or something like that, or the one study that was released a couple weeks ago about where they believe dogs have evolved to have a specific facial muscle that gives the soft puppy eye look, and it's not found in wolves. That's on my list for this is something we'll be talking about the next time we do one of those shows. And it's the goal is to educate. Businesses have missions. A key part of our mission has always been not just to provide, friendly service and quality products, but also to educate people. If people want to come and talk and learn, when we do our nutrition session during a training class, if one of my other staff is teaching it, they'll say, if you want to know more, talk to Don or Kate. Kate's our operations manager, and they'll keep talking and answering your questions until you tell them to shut up, because we're that passionate about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Roman. It's really, I'm so glad we connected on Facebook and we found each other. We had probably a couple of years ago, a chat back and forth, and learned a lot about our similarities, and was really excited to have an opportunity to be on your show and talk to you some more and to answer some of your questions. And I think one of the things that's really important, something we talked about at the last PPG conference, is how we all have to learn to work together if we're going to accomplish these passions and goals we all have. And I think the more we can collaborate, the better off it's going to be for pets and ourselves.
Thank you so much, Don, for your time today. Looking forward to discuss very soon more about prong collars, more about e-collars, more about aversive combinations of things that we usually do to animals and we should avoid them. And we will have discussing also about having alternative solutions to those that we think only e-collar or only a prong collar can solve. And pretty soon I would like to talk to you about also the nutritional aspect, because I feel you implement also nutritional as nutrition medicine or food medicine and behavior modification.
No, would love to do that. And that nutrition has been a whole huge journey for us as well. And Gus got us started on that too within the first few months of having him, because he had some health issues which we tried to treat with nutrition, and our vet was working with us on it, and it caused us to have to go out and learn a lot ourselves.
Thank you so much again, Don.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day. Take
You
care.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.